that Chiefs offense, even with some of the receiver question marks, but have had a little bit of a slow start to this season. Are you concerned with them at all?
A little bit. I think that their defense has played really well, and the thing about a salary cap league, especially in a league where you pay your quarterback. Last season, Mahomes was the first quarterback in the history of the NFL to win a Super Bowl while making more than 13% of the salary cap. He made 17%, so he's an outlier. But the thing is when you do that, you're going to be weak somewhere on your roster, right? There's just not enough money to go around. Last year, they traded Tyreek Hill. They got 10 draft picks. Their draft picks played more games than anybody in the NFL last year. They win the Super Bowl. They lose Juju Smith-Schuster. They don't really, do much to replace him with a veteran, and that's the place. Historically, the Chiefs have always been great on offense, weak on defense. Now they're pretty good on defense. Last week they held Trevor Lawrence without a touchdown, but they're now weak at wide receiver. And I think if I'm a Chiefs fan, I'd rather have that because I know Mahomes can elevate receivers better than he can elevate defensive ends and corners. So I think that's a better gamble, but it's going to be a journey. And I think if you watch the Patriots over their dynasty, September was always a little ugly for them, right? They're always figuring out like the new thing. They start out 2-2, 3-1, but ugly. And I think that's the Chiefs' reality now. You go into the season, you can win, the back half of the season pretty easily. So you use the time to kind of work through the Rashee Rices, the Kadarius Tonys, and deal with those warts because they are going to be there.
Eric, there is a wide receiver that's going into this year's draft, and his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. I watched his father play in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning. He's one of the greatest, I believe, wide receivers I've seen in the last 20 years. He's fantastic, very underrated. I know people, when you look at Randy Moss and Terrell Owens, they don't even mention Marvin Harrison. But Marvin Harrison has the numbers to be compared to those great wide receivers. His son could be even better than his father. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster. What type of prospect is Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, it's crazy when Herman Moore had the record for number of catches in a year at 123, and I want to say Harrison, when he broke it, had like 140 something. So he was an unbelievable player. Obviously, Peyton Manning helped, but he was an otherworldly guy. I think Harrison's fast. His son's faster. I think his son's a little bit bigger too. Marvin was always a little skinny coming out of Syracuse, and then bulked up kind of as his career went on. I think Harrison has has no kind of deficiencies coming out, which is different than his dad. Which will be great. I think that the hard part is wide receivers still difficult to play at the NFL level coming right out. That's why a lot of second round picks, if you look at the historical data, first round picks do slightly better than second round picks and less better than other positions. The drop off is much bigger because at wide receiver often they want to get a guy in and have him play one role, slot or outside. And when you pick a wide receiver in the top 10, he's got to be kind of everything. He's got to be Garrett Wilson. He's got to play every position. And so my only worry is, as good as he is at Ohio State right now, make sure that he gets into a place where he's complimenting somebody so that he can grow into that role, much like Randy Moss did, right? When he had Chris Carter and Jake Reed in Minnesota. Like, that's got to be kind of the hope. Because I don't want him to go somewhere like Houston, for example. Well, Houston doesn't have a pick in the first 10, but I don't want him to go to a place where he's got to be everything everywhere all at once for that team.
So the big dilemma this offseason with a lot of these running backs wanting to get paid, and obviously a lot of analytics guys that are saying don't pay the running backs, so you could find that value or at other places. Like, are you that one of those types of people? And if so, like, how do those teams, the Giants, the Raiders, et cetera, do that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's tough because we get Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, their talent is really apparent. I mean, it's pretty clear that there's a gradient of talent at running back. The problem is it's that position is so dependent on offensive line. It's so dependent on scheme. It's so dependent on situation that the production function shrinks those differences when it comes to running back ability. And so when a guy like Barkley goes up for, and asks for, let's say, $15 million a year, there's a guy like Latavius Murray who's not as good as Barkley, right? He's probably 75% of what Barkley is, but the production's probably 85% of what Barkley is if you give him the same offensive line and the same coordinator and all that kind of stuff. And that's different at quarterback, right? Mahomes is probably 10% better than Josh Allen, but the production is 25%, right? That the quarterback position sort of enlarges differences because of how important it is. And so as such, and given that, as well as sort of the way that running backs age, which is quickly in the NFL and worse than any other position in the league, that's just all adds up to these teams finally, and it's been this way for a decade or so, finally being like, it's just really hard to marry a running back. You'll just date them for 4 years and then let them walk.